People assume a pedophile is someone with two heads running around, but really they're just your neighbour, your brother, your uncle.
Every month, hundreds of Victorians are sharing millions, that's millions of images of child abuse material, both movies and images. That is astounding. It's an astounding statistic, and it's not just a statistic. It's about people, it's about children, it's about children's lives. And this targeted operation executed 20 warrants over a 2-week period. Those 20 warrants result in the arrest of 20 offenders for offences relating to accessing, downloading, distributing and possessing child abuse material. We've charged 13 people at this stage, and of those 13 people, they're charged with the offences you would expect, both Commonwealth and or Victorian offences. These are significant offences in Victoria. They carry 10 years imprisonment, and the Commonwealth offences are 15 years imprisonment. Yeah, some parents, they age between 19 and 62. All of them were men, and from a range of different occupations, administration. One was in the education field, another in the hospitality area, and several unemployed as well.
The thing is, the internet was not designed with things like anonymity and privacy in mind, so everything you do and say online can, and in many cases will, be tracked, recorded and traceable back to you. Some people are very concerned about their privacy, and in the mid-1990s, one such group of people was the United States federal government. A team of computer scientists and mathematicians working for a branch of the US Navy known as the Naval Research Laboratory, abbreviated as NRL, began development of a new technology known as onion routing. Onion routing would allow for anonymous bidirectional communication, where the source and destination cannot be determined by a midpoint. This is accomplished by creating something known as an overlay network. An overlay network is simply a network that is built on top of another network, in this case the internet. So instead of using the normal unencrypted internet, also known as the surface web, your traffic goes through an overlay network. Now, there are many different types of overlay networks, but a network using onion routing technology would be classified as a darknet. A darknet can only be accessed via specific software and/or authorization. In case that was hard to follow, all you need to know is that people working for the US government created a system which will allow for anonymous communication over the internet. However, the people over at NRL soon realized a major limitation.
The United States government can't simply run an anonymity system for everybody and then use it themselves only, because then every time a connection came from it, people would say, oh, it's another CIA agent looking at my website, if those are the only people using the network. So you need to have other people using the network so that they blend together.
So what he's saying is that for the network to be truly anonymous, it has to be available to everyone and not just the US government. So the NRL was forced to release their onion routing technology to the public. The technology was eventually released under an open source license and became Tor. Tor stands for the Onion Router and is the software you need to download to be able to access this network of onion routers. Today, millions of people across the globe use Tor for a multitude of purposes. Everything from innocent daily browsing to criminal activities. And while it is the most popular, Tor is but one amongst numerous darknets. Together, they all make up the dark web. Subsequently, the dark web forms a small part of the deep web. The deep web is everything on the web that cannot be indexed by search engines. It's nothing like the dark web, as most of us use the deep web all the time. The deep web has a lot more content than the surface web. How much more? Well, we don't know, because by its very nature it's near impossible to determine. A paper from 2001 estimated that the deep web is 500 times the size of the surface web. But then again, that estimation is over a decade old. All we can say for certain is that deep web content accounts for the vast majority of the content on the World Wide Web. So to summarize, the surface web is content that can be indexed by search engines. The deep web is content that cannot be indexed by search engines. And the dark web is a fraction of the deep web, consisting of numerous darknets which require specific software and/or authorization to access. Okay, we know what's on the surface web and we know what's on the deep web. But what do we find on the dark web? More specifically, the darknet known as Tor. As mentioned, you can use Tor for almost anything, browsing the web, checking your email, posting on forums, instant messaging, watching YouTube videos, you name it. But the dark web aspect comes in the form of hidden services. A hidden service is essentially a website that can only be accessed via Tor, and the address for a hidden service will always end in .onion. So if I attempt to access this hidden service using Google Chrome, nothing happens. It will only connect using specialized software such as the Tor browser. This is the dark web. Well, one site on the dark web. This specific site is known as the Hidden Wiki and attempts to list as many publicly known hidden services as possible. In October of 2013, the FBI took down the online drug marketplace known as Silk Road. The website had been in operation since the beginning of 2011, with a total revenue estimated at 1.2 billion. News about the Silk Road website brought the dark web out of the dark and right into the public eye. This graph shows daily traffic over the Tor network before Silk Road was mentioned in mainstream media. This is after. Only a few months after Silk Road had been taken down, ex-administrators of the site launched Silk Road 2.0. However, in late 2014, the FBI arrested the admins and the second marketplace was taken down as well. A few hours after that, Silk Road 3.0 was launched, and the seemingly endless spiral continues. And keep in mind that Silk Road was just one website among many. You can find numerous others just like it, selling every illegal drug you can imagine and more. Fortunately, the dark web has some much more depraved and gruesome extremes. Many websites contain various forms of sexualized torture and killing of animals, and child pornography sites are a huge problem on the dark web. A site known as Lolita City, which has now been taken down, contained over 100 gigabytes of photos and videos and had around 15,000 members.
Greetings. This message is intended as a warning to the owners and users of the Lolita City forums, Hidden Wiki, and Freedom Hosting. It has come to our attention that you believe you are safe in the darknet. That you believe you are free to manufacture, distribute, and openly consume child pornography. It has come to our attention that you believe your behavior is protected speech. We are here to tell you that on all of these points, you are mistaken. Our demand is very simple. End your hosting.
Lux in some ways stands out and in some ways just like the other darknet pedophiles that I spoke to. A lot of people I know ask, why would someone like this speak to a member of the media? And I think that one of the ways that he's just like the other people in this community is that he needs someone to speak to. He's still a human being, and this is a secret that they keep. And they saw me as someone who they could safely speak to. And so you could get that sense from him the same way you could get that sense from the other pedophiles in the dark net. He was different, I think, in that he was singularly hated by other pedophiles. I hadn't met too many other people who even like entire communities of other pedophiles really despised. Lux was hated in the pedophile community because he promoted hurtcore, which is a genre within a genre, right? It's a genre of child pornography in which the idea is that the kid is getting hurt and hit and abused beyond the normal level of abuse of child pornography. And that is something that a not insignificant amount of people enjoy, but that even more other pedophiles hate. It's funny to call them that, but the mainstream pedophiles basically think of this as abhorrent because as part of the justification of their actions, they see themselves as part of child love. They see themselves as doing what's right for the child, what the child wants. And while that is requires its own twisted sense of justification, it's another level of, it's another twist to say that the kid wants to be hit. There is no twist. The people who enjoy hurtcore, for the most part, get off on the fact that the kids are not enjoying it. And that is, to even most pedophiles, really abhorrent.
Before obviously going in, we knew who Lux was, the user. He was considered the worst administrator of some of the worst websites in the world at the time. So we knew who the user was, we just had to make the connection to that Lux was Matthew Graham. When I first saw him on the day that we served the warrant, I was surprised by his confidence, that he was quite calm in that environment. In his mind, I can't imagine how that would have been going, him thinking, have they got me? Because obviously there's a bit of bluff. What we've got, what we don't have, not all our cards are played at the time. The level of and the type of content that he was dealing with was considered the worst in the world by FBI, by Europol. It was hardcore, hurtcore material. So torture and abuse of babies, mainly through to I think about 12. He was surprising. When it got to the interview, how candid and open he was to talk about that level of depravity, that it didn't flinch, it just rolled off his tongue what he was talking about. It was staggering to think that the FBI and Europol are all chasing Lux. Who is he? Where is he? And lo and behold, he's here. And he's a 21-year-old.
Good evening. Victims have cheered in court as family's SA carer Shannon McCool was jailed for 3 decades for inflicting vile sexual abuse on already troubled children. McCool, who was also the kingpin of a global child porn network, was described by the judge as a worldwide evil like he'd never seen before.
McCool cried as Judge Paul Rice described in harrowing detail the repulsive crimes inflicted on 7 children. The former family's SA carer was trusted to look after them in a government-run residential facility. But when one of the state's heaviest sentences was imposed on him, the courtroom erupted into applause.
It's over in one part of it's over, and now I can deal with our family trauma.
McCool's victims were as young as 18 months. Some were disabled, all were vulnerable.
It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
McCool uploaded hundreds of thousands of videos and images to his depraved website, which fed an international market of more than 1,000 pedophiles. As website CEO, McCool boasted and encouraged others to post their own sickening material.
I've got no remorse for him at all. I hope that he gets what he deserves.
The court has heard how the parents of prolific paedophile Richard Huckle begged police to take him away after he told them that he had abused several young children. The 30-year-old faces multiple life sentences after he admitted 71 child sex offences, including the rape of a 6-month-old baby. Our crime correspondent, Martin Butt, reports.
Prosecutor Brian O'Neill told the court the following day his mother questioned him about the allegations, and he admitted to her that he had had sexual activity with children aged 3 to 13. His mother was extremely upset and angry. She and his father called the police and asked them to take their son away, making it clear they did not want him under their roof. Both have made witness statements in support of this prosecution. Huckle had passed a short teaching course at the British Council offices in the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur. He used it to move into a poor community in the city and got access to children he abused systematically over many years. It was a campaign of rape, said the prosecutor, not simply against the children, but against the whole community. He was trusted by the parents to take these children out for treats on their birthdays, to assist them with lessons and homework, to take them to church. He was trusted to take children out of care homes where they'd been placed. And he gained their trust by the way that he had ingratiated himself into this very poor community in a shantytown. Huckle initially told investigators they must prove all the 91 charges against him, but he eventually confessed to 71. A third of them carry a maximum life sentence. The judge and lawyers spent most of the day viewing the harrowing videos that Huckle had made of himself abusing his victims, images he shared with others on encrypted websites. He boasted to fellow paedophiles, impoverished kids are much easier to seduce than middle-class Western kids. According to a psychiatric report, Huckle said that he hoped one day to be freed from prison and marry a South Asian woman. Together, they would adopt children, and she would allow him to abuse them.
So what was it I've done? Oh, what was it I'm supposed to have done? So
the offences that I've arrested you on suspicion of being involved in were blackmail, causing or inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, possessing indecent images of children.
Sounds like the rap sheet from hell.
Distributing indecent images of children.
Okay, here's a question then. How do you prevent criminals from using these services while still allowing lawful citizens to protect their privacy? The answer is quite simple. You don't. You can't restrict something that is by its very nature meant to be unrestricted. That's the problem with anonymity. Anyone can do or say anything, so we have no choice but to take the good with the bad. Even if law enforcement agencies had the ability to shut the entire network down completely, they wouldn't, because the US government need Tor as much as anybody else. Remember, they created this technology, and they did not create this technology just so they could release it to the public for free. It was only released to the public as public usage is an essential part of what makes Tor anonymous. It takes us right back to this.
The United States government can't simply run an anonymity system for everybody and then use it themselves only, because then every time a connection came from it, people would say, oh, it's another CIA agent.
Who do you think funds the Tor project? In 2007, 100% of the Tor project's funding came from the US government. In 2008, 86%. In 2009, 90%. In 2010, 94%. In 2011, 78%. In 2012, 81%. In 2013, 94%. A government agent working undercover is as much in need of online anonymity as a terrorist, pedophile, or whistleblower. It's everyone or no one. That's the unfortunate truth.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes True Crime podcast series. I'm Peter Overton. For over 40 years now, 60 Minutes has been Australia's leading current affairs television program. In that time, we've had the privilege to witness and report on humanity at its finest, but also at its most flawed. In this True Crime series, we look back at some of our most significant investigations, the criminal cases that still stand out for us today. In this episode, reporter Tara Brown recounts the chilling case of Peter Scully, an Australian paedophile who operated out of the Philippines. 60 Minutes tracked Scully for months and was on the ground when he was finally apprehended and arrested. The stomach-churning details of the case have had a profound impact on all involved. And a warning, this 60 Minutes podcast is for mature audiences and may contain strong language and adult themes. Here's Tara.
Behind every 60 Minutes story are people. The very best people and also the very worst. For all my years of reporting, it doesn't get much worse than paedophile Peter Scully.
The perpetrator of these horrendous acts is the most depraved individual I've ever come across in 26 years of policing. I've never seen anything like this.
Peter Gerard Scully is one of Australia's worst pedophiles. From a decrepit shack in a remote corner of the Philippines, Scully operated a lurid yet lucrative business. Here he'd direct and star in videos of child sex abuse, which he would then market to a rapacious global syndicate of pedophiles. Scully thought he was beyond the reach of the law, but he was wrong. In 2015, 60 Minutes joined special law enforcement agents, including the Australian Federal Police, in the Philippines in their international manhunt for this monster.
Give me your name.
It's Peter Scully.
What?
It's Peter Scully.
Peter Scully.
Okay, Peter Scully. We have 6 warrants for your arrest. Wow. Okay?
This podcast will take you inside the Peter Scully investigation. How 60 Minutes helped track down one of Australia's worst pedophiles. And we come face to face with the depraved predator in this behind bars interview. Why do you rape young children?
Here in the Philippines, if a girl is under 13 and you touch her anywhere sexually, it's rape. It's statutory rape. Right? Doesn't mean you actually had sexual intercourse.
And a warning, this content is confronting. The Peter Scully story begins in Melbourne in 2011. Back then, Scully was a financial crook on the run. He'd rorted unsuspecting investors of millions of dollars and had been charged with 117 fraud offences. Scully fled Australia for the Philippines. But Detective Paul Hopkins from the Australian Federal Police was soon on Scully's tail.
We had given photographs out to the Philippines National Police to look for him in case an extradition was sought for the fraud.
Could they find him?
At that stage, no. They had had a look and the photos were distributed to various police stations, particularly in Cagayan de Oro, where that was the last place that he was heard of.
4 years later, Scully's crimes had gone from fraud to something far more sinister. He would be wanted for the most horrific crimes against children. What is the case against Peter Scully?
There's 2 cases in the Philippines. The first case is led by the Philippines National Police, and that is the slavery, the fact that he's kept those 2 young girls in a house and sexually abused them, tied them in dog chains and allegedly made videos of them. That's one case. The second case is the holding of young victims and sexually abusing them, and then unfortunately and horrifically ended in the death of one of the victims.
60 Minutes first met Paul Hopkins from the AFP while researching the issue of cyber sex crime and child sex trafficking. It was during Paul's secondment to the Philippines that it was discovered Scully, wanted for fraud, was also now the most serious suspect in a sadistic case of sexual crimes against young girls. And so began our close association with the authorities as they embarked on an extensive and difficult manhunt. Police called us in when they believed they were close to catching the pedophile. Frustratingly, it was a false start. The trail went cold, but no one was prepared to give up, and that commitment paid off. Not long after, we got the call again and were there when the authorities tracked down Scully. And were able to finally arrest him.
You have the right to remain silent. Huh? You have the right to have your own culture. Okay?
Anything that you might say may be used
against you.
So you better not talk.
Huh?
Give me your name.
It's Peter Scully.
What?
It's Peter Scully.
Peter Scully's methods of attracting his young victims were insidious and sickening. He used his own teenage girlfriends, who seemed unthreatening and trustworthy, to lure the poor and vulnerable. On his behalf, they would entice starving street children with food before delivering them to Scully, who would mercilessly torture and sexually abuse them.
For me, I'm just hoping to get out of here. But I'm not thinking if I can get out of here. Because what I did, I will be old here in the jail forever.
On first impressions, 18-year-old Carme Ann Alvarez seems even younger than her tender years, sweet and childlike, but she will spend the rest of her life in prison. Alvarez was one of Scully's girlfriends, but first she was his victim. Her first encounter with Scully gives us a chilling insight into how he operated to trap unsuspecting young girls.
How did you meet Peter Scully?
I met him in a bar with foods, and I go to him because I feel so hungry because he's sitting there with his girlfriend before, and then I asked him some food and drinks with her girlfriend, and then the girl asked me if they can bring me in their house and then taking photos. She gave me a address. And then at that next day, I go to that address, and then she give me a food, she give me a drinks. After that, she said to me, take off your clothes, like that. And then that's why I take off my clothes. Then she gave me a sexy undies, sexy bras.
Who is this woman? What's her name?
Her name is Lizelle Margallo, and that's her girlfriend before. 2 years ago.
Peter Scully's girlfriend.
Yeah. And then she said to me, hold this teddy bear like this and then post like that. Then I posted. I do it what she's saying because for me it's my job. For me it's my work.
And how old were you at this stage?
At that age I'm 15. Yeah, I'm 15 years old.
Desperately poor, Alvarez was a teenage prostitute who soon became deeply entangled in Scully's dark web.
He told me he's broke up with her girlfriend, he's broken like this, he needs some girl to take care of him. So I leave my boyfriend, I leave him because I chose Peter, because he said to me, I get you back in the school, and then he's lots of promising to me.
Convinced his promises would give her a better life, Alvarez agreed to become Scully's girlfriend, replacing Lizelle Margallo. But very soon, Alvarez discovered she had no choice but to become Scully's accomplice if she wanted the relationship to continue. Scully would soon ensnare Alvarez deeper into his sinister operation by suggesting that they take street children into their home.
He said to me, can we adopt some street kids? And I said, I don't know, I don't think so. What if my sister to live with us? Then he said to me, no, I don't want your sister. I want a street kid to help them, he said. So I didn't think he had a bad idea about these kids. So I go in the city, then I meet these two kids. Then I said to these kids, you want to come with me? And then the kids say, yes.
So are they sisters? Are they...
No, they're cousins.
They're cousins?
Yeah.
So you asked them to come home with you?
Yeah.
Because Peter wanted 2 girls?
Yeah.
And did he tell you what age he wanted?
He told me.
What did he say?
He say he wants 9 and 12.
The 12-year-old Alvarez lured off the streets was Rosie. With the promise of food, Rosie and her 9-year-old cousin happily followed, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Inside a dirty room of a decrepit shack, Scully forced Rosie and her young cousin to endure a nightmare.
So after eating, they were asked to be naked, and they were photographed and took a video.
Rosie bravely recounted her terrifying ordeal. She told me Scully used a dog collar and chain to tie up the 2 young girls before sexually abusing them. And he filmed it all, the physical assaults and the mental torment as the girls prepared to die.
What else did Peter do to you while you were in the house?
To dig their graves, and while they were being photographed and videoed. And that night, Peter Scully assaulted us.
After 5 monstrous days, Scully's girlfriend Alvarez found the compassion to free Rosie and her cousin. The 2 made a dangerous dash for freedom before courageously going to the police. It was incredibly difficult for this broken young woman to speak of the humiliation she experienced, but somehow, and thankfully, Rosie found the strength to expose Scully for the monster he is. Comforted by her parents during our interview, Rosie hopes for a time when her horror week with Scully no longer haunts her.
Do you think you'll ever be able to get over the events there in that house? Do you think you'll ever be happy again and not think about them?
Perhaps when I grow up.
I hope so. I hope so.
As appalling as Rosie's ordeal was, the depths of Scully's depravity were yet to be revealed. As AFP detective Paul Hopkins explains, it was the discovery of a series of films of other children suffering unfathomable cruelty which exposed Scully's most degenerate operation.
A video had surfaced in Europe, and that video involved a white male and Asian females molesting children, very young children, as young as 2 and even younger. That video was called Daisy's Destruction, and there was a series of these videos. And so around the world, police and government organisations were doing what they do and searching for where this could have occurred and trying to find the victims.
There were 3 main victims in the Daisy's Destruction videos: Cindy, 11, Liza, 12, and Daisy herself, who was barely 18 months old. The films showed each young child tied up, drugged and tortured by a lanky male foreigner and a female Filipino accomplice whose faces were disguised. The discovery of the obscene footage kick-started an international manhunt by a multinational enforcement team. Dutch police isolated the abuse to a specific region in the Philippines, but still no one could identify the abusers. The man behind the grotesque videos made sure his face was pixelated, but what he couldn't hide was his accent, and it took another Australian to identify it.
In child protection, particularly when there's horrific videos like this, I try to avoid watching them. I unfortunately, and I can't get it out of my head, looked at the videos, and sure enough, there was. I said, "I'm so sorry. It appears to be an Australian," and that's awful. It's awful.
At around the same time, local Filipino police were pursuing Rosie's abuse case. They are on the hunt for an awkward, tall male foreigner residing in remote villages. Then incredibly, the local investigators had a stroke of luck. One of them remembered the images of Peter Scully, an Australian wanted for fraud, handed to them by the AFP years ago. They had no photo of Rosie's attacker, but the description was an uncanny match to Scully. Acting on a hunch and with nothing to lose, local Filipino authorities showed Rosie a photo of Peter Scully. She identified him as her attacker, and the case was finally cracked open.
As part of their investigations, they showed to her the photograph of Scully that they'd been looking for a fraud, and sure enough, she said that's him.
Why would the police show victims of sexual assault a photo of a man suspected of fraud?
Good question. It was basically good police work. So they had the photo there of this person that they knew as Peter Scully and other aliases. And when the victims came in and Alvarez came in, because the name of the person they were saying who held them was Peter, they put two and two together and showed them the photograph. Great police work.
Right, so but really there are two completely coincidental episodes happening here. There's the escape of children who are being held by Scully at the same time that one of his hideous videos is circulating, and there's a separate investigation into that, and then the two come together.
Correct. And they came together by just good, plain, old-fashioned police work and by everyone doing their little bit.
Collaboration between the two police teams meant they finally knew who they were chasing. But one burning question remained. What had become of the three young victims in the Daisy videos?
Oh, whenever I remember the video, sometimes I cannot really help myself. I cried, yes.
For Janet Francisco, lead investigator from the National Bureau of Investigation, this case has been the hardest of her career.
Because I can, actually feel the pain that the youngest victim had suffered during the time in the videos. So as a mother, you don't like your child to suffer the same fate.
In a village far from the bustle of Manila, investigators found the exact locations where the abuse captured in Scully's sordid films took place. They painstakingly compared the backgrounds seen in the abuse videos, frame by frame, with the houses they searched, until they found a match. The narrow staircase, the dirt-clad tiles, the grimy windows, all identical to those in the Daisy's destruction videos. Paul Hopkins took me through one such house of horrors.
And if you were a 9-year-old girl being taken up here, you'd be terrified, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. It's dim and dark and very scary, and my thinking and my suspicion is this is where they headed down that path towards the dungeon nature and the real depravity to add to the sexual abuse.
So the violence, the torture.
Exactly.
Not long after this discovery, the task force received unexpected news. Daisy, the 18-month-old baby tortured in the horrendous film, had miraculously survived, rescued by her family soon after the video was filmed. 12-year-old Liza was also found, identified by local school children. But for Cindy, help arrived too late. In a ramshackle house under the dirty floor, investigators discovered Cindy's body. Repeatedly raped and tortured, Cindy was murdered before her body was discarded under the floorboards in a shallow grave.
So there will be a DNA. There must be an identification of the remains of the victim, so that we can really validate whether or not it is really the girl we were looking before, and so there would be a DNA examination.
Okay. I mean, how strongly do you believe?
100% for sure.
And how old was she?
She was 11.
11 years old. Is it believed that Peter Scully and his accomplices then lived in the house?
No. They immediately left this house.
Lead investigator Janet Francisco warns me, nothing can prepare you for the exhumation of a child's body. And she's right.
The victim was made to dig first.
I didn't know that.
Her own grave before she was killed. She was like strangled several times, and her arms were tied by the accused, and as well as her feet.
Do we know if he filmed it?
Yeah, I think so, because one of the previous live-in partner of the accused saw the video.
The video of this girl's murder?
Yes, yes.
As police close in on Scully, the mammoth investigation comes to an end. The manhunt is finally over, as the predator is finally caught.
You have the right to remain silent. Huh? You have the right to have your own culture.
Give me your name.
It's Peter Scully.
What?
It's Peter Scully.
Peter Scully.
Okay, Peter Scully.
But for the family of murdered 11-year-old Cindy, the torment will never end. Casualties of poverty, hopelessness and tragic circumstance, Cindy's parents placed their unquestioning faith in Scully on the promise that he would offer her a better life. Someone who they thought would educate and feed their daughter. It was a mortifying and fatal mistake. On first meeting Peter Scully, the most menacing thing about him is how unremarkable he is. For all the vile crimes he's accused of committing, you half expect some warning sign, some clue to the monster beneath the banal exterior. But of course there is none, which is what makes him such a successful predator.
Are they treating you well in here?
Yeah, it's fine. They're good people. The guards, the inmates, NBI, they're good people.
It almost sounds like you're enjoying yourself.
If you're locked in a room, can you enjoy yourself? I suppose you make a choice. You can be calm, you can be mad, you can be upset, you can be angry. Better you stay calm.
Are you frightened?
I try not to be. At the moment I am like, you don't live day by day. I can't live day by day because you don't know what's going to happen in 1 minute. Like this morning, I'm writing a very long story actually.
What were you writing?
The chief of the NBI, who's a very nice man, mind you, of course they ask me a lot of questions because there's a lot of questions to ask. And I, in my own mind, I can't answer them honestly because I don't know the answer.
Why is that?
Because they're not. The questions are simple, but the answers are not.
What are the questions?
Like a simple basic question, why did you do what you do? But which part of that is, what are you talking about? You know?
Okay. Well, why don't I ask you, why do you rape young children?
Yeah, that's a typical question they ask. Yeah.
And what would the answer to be to that?
The answer is, I don't know. I don't know the real answer.
That you admit you do it.
Here in the Philippines, if a girl is under 13 and you touch her anywhere sexually, it's rape. It's statutory rape. Right? Doesn't mean you actually had sexual intercourse. But we'll get back to the previous question of what am I writing. That is, I'm writing about every day I've been here, what has happened, what influenced me. So far, I'm about 1/3 through.
So let's go back to the heart of the question I was asking you. Why do you have sex with children?
For that, I would like you to wait until I finish writing this so I can understand.
Well, why don't we hazard a guess?
No, don't hazard a guess.
Is it because you're depraved?
Depraved? Maybe.
Maybe?
Could be many reasons. What I'm looking for is the real reason why I took that road and what drove me to it. Because in Australia I wasn't like that. In the first 12 months here I wasn't like that. So what drove me that way? That's what I wanted to know, and that's what I want to tell everyone. So...
and is that your priority, is it?
At the moment, yeah. For the next 3 days.
Is trying to understand your own behaviour.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Intriguingly, Scully submitted himself to an interview he didn't have to do. He wasn't expecting us, he could have refused. Instead, he chose to do it, but was flippant and arrogant.
So you admit to murder?
As I said, I'm writing an account of all my time here, and it will include everything, absolutely everything. It will not miss out on one little detail, okay?
So while you have no understanding of why you do what you do, is that right?
I'm getting a better understanding as I write this, a lot better.
Right. Can you give us an insight into that?
No, as I told the press before, I will wait until I'm totally finished.
If you don't have a full insight yet, do you have any remorse for what you do?
Oh, of course I have remorse.
Why, of course?
What do you mean, why, of course?
Why, of course?
Well, you think people don't have remorse?
No, I'm asking you, as somebody who is a repeat offender here, who went on the run, who's only here because you've been caught, not because you turned yourself in. At what point do you actually feel sorry for what you've done? Is it at the point where you're captured?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. That's a good question. Well done. That's a very good question. At what point do you feel remorse?
And at what point was that?
At what point was that? I can't answer that honestly yet.
Why isn't it the point where you're actually raping somebody, violently torturing them? Why isn't it at the point when you kill a child? Why isn't it then? Why don't you realise the extent of what you've done at that point?
Maybe you should ask a psychiatrist that question.
I'm asking the man who did it.
Yeah. So, for all those types of questions or types of answers, many other questions, I just ask you please be patient and wait until I finish writing.
What about all the people you've conned money out of?
Conned money out of?
Would you consider them victims?
We're going back to the business. Cons, you have wonderful words.
Well, you're the one facing 100 warrants on fraud, so I think my definition is, my use of the word is quite appropriate.
I won't comment on that because you're so far south, it's just ridiculous. Yeah. Anyway, are we almost done? Because we're going around in circles.
I'm not finished yet.
All right. Okay.
We believe that there is still one girl missing. Where is she?
From now on, my answer will be everything will be in the journal. You can keep asking questions, but that will be my answer.
What is it about you, Peter, that hates children and women so much?
I might address that in the journal.
So you accept that you do?
I don't accept anything, but I might put your question in the journal as a question and answer afterwards.
And as a parent, how can you reconcile what you've done to children?
Next question, please.
Do you accept that you were ruining their lives as soon as you came in touch with them?
In the journal.
So you really have no sympathy for these people, for these kids?
That is definitely in the journal. I think we are finished.
I think we are.
Okay.
He can get up. Get up, please.
We go. Thanks.
For many officers working the case, like Paul Hopkins from the AFP, Scully's eventual incarceration was bittersweet because it came after so much damage had already been done.
The mere sexual abuse of children is one of the most horrific crimes there is. It doesn't get much worse. In this case, it did. It's not just sexuality, which is awful, it's brutality as well. And to do that for other people's gratification, how can you comprehend that? As a parent and as a human, how can you comprehend that? It doesn't make sense.
How do you forget the images that you've seen?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever get it out of your head.
Upon reflection, there is much tragedy in the Peter Scully story. That Scully was able to convince his girlfriends to lure street children through food and shelter into his clutches is confounding. That there is such a widespread market for the vile videos Scully produced is sickening. And the fact that impoverished parents blindly handed their children to Scully on the promise that a complete stranger would offer them a better life is heartbreaking. But sadly, this wretched narrative is all too familiar to Filipino investigator Janet Francisco.
You know, I observed that the Filipinos are mostly the victims here because we are poor. Because that's why, you know, foreigners take advantage of our condition. So, you know, my countrymen would be lured by the promises of those people. So I just wish that, you know, in God's time, my countrymen will really, really think very hard before they give their children to foreigners, to other people, because no one can really take care of their own child except them. We have to educate them of, what is really human trafficking, how can they avoid it, and prevent the abuses that may be committed by bad people.
The investigation of Peter Scully reveals just how bad people can be. Scully remains in jail while on trial in the Philippines. He is facing judgment on 75 charges made against him of child murder, human trafficking, rape and torture, as well as the production and dissemination of sadistic child pornography. If convicted, this 55-year-old will never be released. His incarceration giving relief and some freedom to his young victims, who will never again be hurt by Peter Scully.
If you have any further information about this case, please let us know. You can contact us through the 60 Minutes Australia website. The original 60 Minutes story, Catching a Monster, was reported by Tara Brown and produced by Rebecca Latorna. Podcast narrator, me, Peter Overton. Podcast producers, Lydia Bilton, Liz Little, Helen Lunn and Tula Udawenko. Sound engineering and design, Joe Lee. Executive producer, Kirsty Thompson. If you would like to watch any of our stories, including Catching a Monster, just head to the 60 Minutes Australia website. To hear more 60 Minutes podcasts, make sure you hit subscribe on iTunes. I'm Peter Overton. Thanks for listening.